Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud that the government of the United Republic of Tanzania has been instrumental in promoting the Kiswahili language throughout Africa and across the world. And it has been at the forefront in terms of the accolades for Kiswahili language. We like to call it Kiswahili Sanifu. So please take time to reach out to my fellow brothers and sisters from Tanzania to better appreciate what that means. In addition, Kiswahili is not only a language, but it's also a carrier of our cultural heritage and manifestation of its speakers. And again, I encourage us to delve deeper into the culture of Swahili and going beyond the language itself, as this is part of the identity that is central to it. Speaking about the development of the Kiswahili language, we must acknowledge the significant role played by the Baraza la Kiswahili la Taifa, BAKITA, the University of Dar es Salaam's Taasisi ya Taaluma za Kiswahili, TATAKI, formerly TUKI, Baraza la Kiswahili Zanzibar, BAKIZA, and the East African Kiswahili Commission, as well as other bodies which have been working hard not only to promote the Kiswahili language, but also to create, standardize, and disseminate Kiswahili terminologies, including those that are much needed in this globalized world. I hope this gathering also acknowledges them and renders them the support that they need to continue doing their work efficiently in their efforts to make the Kiswahili language fully sufficient in the world, characterized with the proliferation of new inventions and technologies which need new vocabulary each day. In the same vein, I also want to acknowledge the role that our Swahili artists are playing in the promotion of the Kiswahili language and culture. Our artists have been taking this language around the world. For instance, the bongo flavor music has reached each corner of the world. Most recently, we had a Kiswahili film, Vuta Nkuvute, Tug of War, just shortlisted for the Oscars 2023 award under the Best International Feature Film category. And this is just the beginning. The creative industry is a major advocate for Kiswahili language and culture, and I urge you to continue to support our artists, and I'm glad my sister here from the government of Kenya can also help in collaboration with other colleagues to see how we can leverage the creative industry as a major vehicle to spread and expand the love for this language that we embrace so dearly. Ladies and gentlemen, in concluding my remarks, I would like to thank all participants of this conference for continuing to promote the Kiswahili language in your different capacities. It is necessary to maintain the unique identity and dignity of the Kiswahili language and culture as it continues to grow around the world. I call upon you to also reflect on our dynamic, transformative environment and the role of the Kiswahili language in this new era of the fourth industrial revolution and even the metaverse. Kiswahili ni lugha yetu, tamaduni wetu na utambulisho wetu. Tushirikiane kukitangaza na kukikuza kwani ni muhimu kwa maendeleo yetu. Kabla sijamaliza, napenda pia kuwapongeza CHAUKIDU kwa kuandaa tamasha la kusherehekea utamaduni wa Kiswahili baada ya mkutano huu. Ni jambo zuri na la kupongezwa. Nawatakia mkutano mwema. Shughuli ni watu. Watu ni shughuli. Na shukrani sana.
Asante sana Balozi, tunashukuru kwa mambo ambayo umeyasema ambayo ni ya ukweli kabisa, busara. So yeah, very good. I want to also say both embassies are our neighbors, right? Down the street. That's what I meant, not Africa. So that's important for us to make sure we know that. We have in this podium in this hall, people from different parts and representatives. We have a representative from the UN, Ms. Zippy Musau. Could you please wave your hand? Yeah. She's representing the UN in New York, and so we're very pleased to have you. She'll have a moment when she'll have to share insights of the UN. So we are keeping your space, just for you. Thank you so much. And then I also want to acknowledge the presence of our students. So Howard students, if you're here, please say hello to our guests from East Africa and from the rest of the world. Please say so in Swahili. Just stand up. It's okay. Amani. Wanatembo, can you say something in Swahili? A phrase in Swahili? Simama. Amani, simama, sema kitu. Asante sana. Kaylin, Nefrateri. Asante. Okay, so we just want you to know that in this gathering, we have these wonderful students who love African languages. So it's not just Swahili. I think we also have Yoruba students. Mwalimu Oluwafunke, do we have Yoruba students? Okay, excellent. Yeah. And so we'll have many of them. Again, as you said, we have 7 languages. But what is important for us to understand is that we pride in foregrounding African issues. And so we're very happy for that. And all of those that I may have not mentioned, I know we have people from the Department of State. We are very happy to have you all. So, asanteni na karibuni.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue on the same note. Actually, we have more students here. And we have a group of students who just arrived from Princeton University. Can you guys stand up and wave? Beautiful. Thank you very much. We also have students from University of Pittsburgh. We have a couple of students here. Can you stand up and wave as well? Beautiful. Thank you. We also have students from Northwestern University. Can you stand up and wave if you're here? Oh, beautiful. We have students from Georgetown University. Do we have a student from Georgetown here? Oh, beautiful. We got one there. Beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. Oh, beautiful. I'm glad you're here. We have students from other universities here in the US. Do we have other students from? Oh, we have students actually from Columbia University. Stand up and wave, please. Beautiful. Thank you. We have students from Penn State University. Penn State? All right.
We are from high school too.
Oh, we have student. Oh, we have a student from high school student. Yeah, beautiful. Welcome. Glad. We're so happy. Even I think beyond so that I can add in there saying so happy, because I think so doesn't really describe what we want to say here. So very much. Okay, beautiful. You can say that. Tuna furaha sana. Kwa Kiswahili tunasema hivyo. Tunafurahi kwamba mmekuja hapa. Karibuni sana. We are so happy and so blessed to have you guys here. Welcome so much, and we are happy because we know that the future of Kiswahili is in good hands. If we have students who are willing to take part in conferences at this time, we're not worried about tomorrow. Thank you very much, guys, for coming here. Sasa tunaenda katika mawasilisho, lakini all right, so we are going to one of our very important part of this conference. We have the keynote speaker who is going to join us on Zoom today. I'm not going to say much before then, but we're going to have our keynote speech soon, and we wanted that to be at the time that we have our special guests here as well. But Before then, let me mention that we're gonna have parallel sessions in the afternoon, and we're gonna have plenaries here. And you guys saw already, we have the president of African Language Teachers Association. We have the director of the National African Language Resource Center. We have other panelists here are gonna be here, but we're going to have plenaries in the afternoon where we're gonna get to hear more about organizations which are represented here and what they do to develop Swahili language and African languages in general. But right now, without taking much time, I'd like to invite our own, I'd like to call our own mother, Mama Aluia Omar, Professor Aluia Omar from Indiana University, who is going to chair this session. Dr. Maka, do we have our keynote speaker ready? Beautiful. All right, so I'm going to invite Mama Aluia Omar to take lead for our keynote speech. Karibu sana.
Sawa. Kama mlivyoambiwa, habari gani kwanza? Jambo. Shughuli na watu ni sisi. Sawa. Kwa hivyo nimeambiwa ni mwenyekiti wa mada elekezi ya kwanza. Na mada ni Kiswahili, umajumui wa Kiafrika na uhuru. Lugha ya ukombozi, jamii na utamaduni. Na itawasilishwa na daktari So itawasilishwa na Daktari Maulana Karenga, and he'll be presenting in English. So Daktari Maulana Karenga is a professor and director of the Department of Africana Studies at the University of California, California State University, Long Beach. He has 2 PhD degrees in science and sayansi ya siasa na shahada ya majadili ya kijamii, social studies, and he is actually the founder of Kanza. Have you heard of Kanza? Yeah, so Kanza. It's a celebration of, it started in here in the US, but it seems like it's being celebrated all over, and there's a lot of Kiswahili words. So Dr. Maulana Karenga will be talking about this. So we'll welcome Dr. Maulana Karenga from California State, and he'll be on Zoom. Dr. Maulana Karenga, karibu. Sauti kumbaya.
Professor Kalenga, just a minute, and then we're trying to fix something here and then continue. Just 1 minute, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, we're having technical difficulties. We're trying to fix some equipment because the speaker is coming from Zoom, and some of our videos won't have a good sound. So we just pause for a second to to see if we'll be able to fix some of these technical problems. So in the meantime, we are showing just only the audience, as you can see them, and some of them are leaving, but we will resume shortly. We're still having some sounds technical difficulties. For those of you who are following us on our YouTube channel,
Saba.
Kama unavyoona katika hizi picha tunazowaleteni hapa ni kwamba watu wengi sana wamehudhuria kongamano hili la Saba ambalo linafanyika hapa Howard University, na bado tunaendelea kusubiri kuunganishwa na mgeni rasmi ambaye kutoka kupitia Zoom. Kwa hiyo watu wanachukua break na watu wanasubiri. Kwa hiyo
majukumu wenu wageni waheshimiwa, CHAUKIDU, wapenzi wanatetezi na wadau wa Kiswahili na wote wale huko kwa niaba ya idara ya masomo ya Tanzania Marekani University jumuiya yangu chuo cha utamaduni wa Afrika wa Marekani ninawaletea salamu za amani, mshikamano, jitahidi iendelea. Miongoni mwetu mtakuja tumaini na mahali pa amani, tunawatakia baraka vile jadi vizuri milele. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, members of CHAUKIDU, advocates, members, stakeholders in Swahili, all who are here, on behalf of the Department of African Studies at CHAUKIDU University, Long Beach, our organization, African American Culture Center, I bring you greetings of peace, solidarity, and continued struggle. May us always find found in peace and happiness, and we wish for you blessings without number, all good things without end. Zaidi ya hayo, tunashuhudia kwamba watu wa Kiafrika wanatumia haki za nitakitikia myself.
You okay?
Zaidi ya hayo, tunashuhudia kama watu wa Kiafrika kama mwanzo wetu kuwa na mwema ndivyo utakavyokuwa maendeleo yetu ikiwa tunathubutu kujitahidi kusema ukweli, kufanya haki kutembea kati ya njia ya nyofu. So to also say, we bear witness as an African people that as our beginning was great and good, so shall our development to our eternity be, if we have struggled to speak true, to justice, walk in the way of rightness. Let me say first a sincere to the officers and members of CHAUKIDU for the invitation and opportunity to come and share with you in this year's historic 7th anniversary conference. The title of my presentation is Swahili Sankofa and Pan-Africanism, the language of liberation, community, and culture. Kiswahili Sankofa Majukumu wa Kiafrika, lugha ya ukombozi, jamii, utamaduni. For the record, let me just say that I'm Dr. Mohammed Rida, professor and chair of the Department of African Studies at California State University, Long Beach. My 2 doctors are first in political science, the second is social ethics with specialization on the Martin ethics, classical ethics of ancient Egypt. I'm an author of numerous books, including My War Idea in Ancient Egypt, selection from the Lucia, ancient wisdom in Odu Ifa, the ethical teachings, introductory black studies, etc. And I am an active scholar in my organization and philosophy has played a major role in black political culture and intellectual culture since the 60s. So the rapid rise of the Swahili language to a global reach and significant, reflected in the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, designated July 7, 2022, as World Peace Swahili Day. And along with the profound relations and satisfaction of work well done to all those in Africa, the U.S., and around the world, who worked hard to achieve the rightful recognition of it. For certainly, Swahili has attained the global presence and importance that engender and require international recognition and engagement for its contribution in communication, education, culture, economic, politics, and diplomacy. And my organization, the African American Cultural Center, US, and I are greatly honored, proud, and pleased to be a significant part of the world-encompassing effort that achieved this historic recognition and moment, having studied, taught, and advocated and spread Swahili across the U.S. and advocated at national as well as international conferences and other venues, formally and informally, since the 1960s. And we also inspired numerous African-American scholars and activists to embrace, learn, teach, and share in various ways. Thus, it became the most widely used continental African language in the U.S. in terms of speaking, naming, and the practice and promotion of projects and programs organized around the Pan-African holiday, Kanza, and Saba. My interest in and embracing Swahili begins in the context of consciousness and practice of liberation. In Tanzania, Nana Mwalimu, Rais Julius Nyerere, had established Swahili as a unifying national language and gave asylum and support to freedom fighters from other African countries. They in turn learned Swahili, and Swahili in the process became a language of liberation and increased its Pan-African presence and importance. Likewise, it was engaged as a language of liberation, culture, community, and Pan-Africanism by us in the U.S., especially those of us in the CHAUKIDU movement, among organizations such as the organization, us, my organization, Sasa, the East, the Institute of Positive Education, Ahidi Ana, and others. And we spoke it and taught it in our homes and organizations and independent schools and used it in formulating CHAUKIDU concept of culture, community, liberation, and struggle. Coming into consciousness as an African and searching for culture grounding and how best to understand and assert myself in liberated, and life-enhancing and growth-preserving ways. I turned to the study of Africa. I was a student at Los Angeles City College when I began to immerse myself in the independent study of Africa, its people, histories, and culture, and its leaders in liberation movement and its social thought. Here, the Swahili word used by Nana Mwalimu Nyerere to urge deep engagement, jitumbukiza, is most appropriate, for it speaks to self-conscious and committed, throwing oneself deeply into thought and practice to achieve an objective. as a student and activist intellectual deeply involved in the Black freedom movement. Not the civil rights movement, but the Black freedom movement, the overarching movement. Civil rights movement is one part of it, 1955 to 1965. Black power phase of the Black freedom movement is 65 to 75. So I participated in both, but my focus was in Black power period, 65 to 75. So I was deeply involved in the Black freedom movement, also it, but especially in the Black power movement. And as an African, and as part of coming into African consciousness, I reasoned I should have a continental language. And for me, it was for me a means of recapturing a lost heritage, not simply the language, but a distinctly African way of knowing, of thinking, of relating, and of being and becoming in the world, which was embedded in the language and reflected in the views, values, and practices that language yielded. For me, that was a communitarian way to understand and assert ourselves in the world, a relational way that taught interrelatedness, mutual respect, reciprocity, and shared good in our lives and the world. Here I chose Kiswahili as our major heritage language. First of all, because I saw it as a Pan-African language, the most widely spoken African language, spoken in several African countries. And I reason that we African Americans are Pan-African people, a new nation, a national community derived from and composed of numerous ethnicities, numerous nations, numerous peoples of Africa. Moreover, choosing Swahili was for me and for us an act of freedom, of self-determination, and a practice of resistance. It was part of our choosing to be African in spite of the dominant society's schizophrenic practice of, on one hand, calling us African to demean us, and then denying we were African when we self-consciously and in a dignifying and dignity-affirming way defiantly claimed and reclaimed our identity as African people. It's no accident then, but because of the decisive, defining historical moment that our turn toward Africa and Swahili began in the midst of the Black freedom movement, the Black liberation movement, the African independence movement, and civil liberation movement all over the world. As Nana Haji Malcolm taught, we were, quote, living in an era of revolution, and the revolt of African Americans, he said, is part of that rebellion against oppression and colonialism, which has characterized this era. And Swahili then became a fundamental ground of building, pursuing, and interpreting that resistance to various forms of oppression, racism, colonialism, imperialism, white supremacy, etc., all the other pathologies so interrelated. At LACC, I studied Arabic and continued to study French, but there was no Swahili classes. So I studied independently until I transferred to UCLA, where I took classes and continued and intensified my study, benefiting greatly from exchanges with Swahili speakers from Tanzania and Kenya. Having grounded myself in the language, I began to teach it, not only as a skill, but also as a culture experience, as an African way of understanding and engaging others in the world. This including teaching culture, proverbial wisdom, the Abunyawat's narrative, and related culture and philosophical concepts from throughout the world African community. Having chosen Swahili as a heritage language of choice, I taught it in community venues, and even on TV as early as 1963 and 1964, respectively, and privileged it in my varied lectures, in my classes, and in the community on history, community, culture, and struggle. Also in 1964, I introduced and taught classes in Swahili at Fremont Adult School in Los Angeles. The class was scheduled for 2 nights a week, but it overflowed with 100 students and had to be rescheduled for 2 classes 4 nights a week. The principal reported that a third of the students were college students, a third of them college graduates, and the other third everyday people interested in learning an African language to recapture a sense of heritage. Some were interested in visiting East Africa, others in preparing for foreign service like the Peace Corps, and others again were interested in learning the language as a way to relate meaningfully to their African heritage, and to learn the worldview and values embedded in and expressed by the language. Moreover, since 1960, at our organization headquarters, the African American Culture Center, I taught and tutored Swahili, continental and African culture, conducted life cycle sermon using Swahili language concept, katika, birth and naming, majando, rites of passage, arusi, and ndoa, wedding, and marriage, kupa, majina, naming, maziko, transition ceremony. We also hired and invited volunteer instructors and tutors from Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda to teach Swahili and continental African culture. I also taught Swahili at my current school, California State University, Long Beach, where I'm professor and chair, as I said, of the Department of African Studies, and where I won approval for its use when I first got there for the then language graduation requirement. And of course, I used Swahili to meet my language requirement for my master's degree and first doctorate, not needing it in a second language for my second doctorate, though I used Swahili and other African languages in my second dissertation. Furthermore, at the Second World Black and African Festival of Arts and Culture Festac, held in Lagos, Nigeria in 1977, as chair of the African American delegation to the Education Forum, I advocated for Swahili to be the Pan-African language for the continent of Africa and the global African community. My interest in and embracing Swahili as a Pan-African language of choice raised questions of how best to communicate this choice and initiative to the African American community, as well as the larger world African community. Important for me was not only our learning of the language as a skill, but also and especially learning it and embracing it, its communitarian views, values, and practices. Thus, I always stressed the communitarian character of the language and culture. For example, I would contrast saying in English, "I'll see you later," to saying "tutaonana," which means we will see each other later. In Swahili, emphasizing the collective and reciprocal character of the Swahili statement. Or I would create a discussion around why we would use kwetu, our place, home, instead of kwangu, my place, even if we live alone. Again, stressing the relational character of our lives and the fundamental African understanding that our relatives are always with us in various senses of the word and concept. And again, this stressed the relational character of this African language and culture and the foundational concept of a person as a person in community, rich in relations and corresponding responsibilities of bringing and sustaining good in the world. The task then was not only to provide language classes, but to create a culture context and process by which there was an ongoing and expansive dialogue with African culture, using Swahili as a central means and modality of communication. Working within the context of my organizations, the emerging CHAUKIDU movement and the Black Liberation Movement, I began teaching, lecturing on, speaking and advocating Swahili. Furthermore, I created 3 essential structural means to ground and engage these practices. First, I created CHAUKIDU philosophy, Bengu, second, Benguzo Saba, and third, the Pan-African holiday, Kanza. As I deepened my study of Swahili and began to study Zulu as well as expanding my studies of continental African cultures and social and liberational thought, I began to develop my philosophy CHAUKIDU, using Swahili, a word, to name it. Subconsciously, a communitarian African philosophy, CHAUKIDU is defined as an ongoing synthesis of the best of African sensitivity, thought, and practice in constant exchange with the world. The term CHAUKIDU has multiple meanings, although it is used now to indicate the ordinary and the normal. But it has a larger semantic range, including meanings of custom, system, regulated principle, regularity of practice, and tradition. Investing new meaning in the range of these definitions, I define CHAUKIDU also as an ongoing synthesis of tradition and reason. So I accepted the core etymology and framework of it, but I added to it because that's what we do with tradition. We build on tradition, the best of what it means to be African and human in the world. Thus, CHAUKIDU philosophy takes inherited tradition and constantly reshapes it, seeking paradigms representing, I repeat, the best of what it means to be African and human in the fullest sense. CHAUKIDU was conceived and practiced as a liberational philosophy born in the midst of the ideological and practical struggle during the Black freedom movement of the 60s. These struggles had an overarching dual aim and thrust. It was to be ourselves and to free ourselves so that we could live good and meaningful lives and come into the fullness of ourselves as persons and as a people. And central to that process was retrieving the best of our ancient and modern culture and using it to ground ourselves, center ourselves, and direct our lives toward good and expansive ends. This process took place under various categories: back to Black, toward re-Africanization, return to the source, coming into the consciousness of our African self and acting accordingly, cultural revolution, and later Sankofa, reaching back and retrieving it, i.e. the best of our culture, continental and diaspora, ancient and modern, and using it in liberated, dignity-affirming, life-enhancing, and world-preserving ways. By culture, we meant and mean the totality of thought and practice by which a people creates itself, celebrates, sustains, and develops itself, and introduces itself to history of humanity. Culture for us then was and is key to our identity, purpose, and direction, and key to the liberation struggle to be ourselves and to free ourselves. Indeed, we agreed with Nana Haji Sekou Touré and Nana Amilcar Cabral that the national liberation struggle itself is an act of culture. Moreover, we agreed with Haji Malcolm that we are a nation within a nation, a cultural nation, a people striving to be its African self and to free itself from the savage pathology of racist oppression. We defined ourselves then as Kawaida culture nationalists, indeed revolutionary culture nationalists, in spite of the COINTELPRO and other opponent mischaracterization and misinformation spread about us and our name. In truth, Kawaida revolutionary culture nationalism is for us thought and practice rooted in three basic propositions. One, the defining feature of any people or nation is its culture. Second, for a people to be itself and free itself, it must be self-determined, self-conscious, and rooted in its own culture. And three, the quality of life of a people and the success of its liberation struggle depends upon waging cultural revolution within and political revolution without, resulting in a radical restructuring and transformation of self, society, and ultimately impacting the world. It is out of cognitive philosophy of life and work and struggle that in 1965 I created the Saba, the 7 principles, the communitarian African value system, and the core communitarian values of the Pan-African holiday, Kanza, which is a celebration of family, community, and culture, which I created in 1966. And it has become now a world-encompassing holiday, Pan-African holiday, celebrated on every continent in the world. These 7 values in Swahili are umoja, unity, kujichagulia, self-determination, ujima, collective and responsibility, ujamaa, cooperative economic, neo-purpose, creativity, and imani faith. I created the Saba as a foundation and framework for being ourselves and freeing ourselves through striving and struggle for good in the world. The practice of these principles was directed toward a constant striving and struggling for liberation, building community, and other good in the world. To say these values of communitarian is to say today, understand and engage the human person as a person in community, related and relating in principled, purposeful, and productive way. Therefore, they stress interrelatedness, togetherness, caring, cooperation, collaboration, mutuality, other directedness, and again, striving and struggling together for a common good. And they offer liberating alternative to vulgar individualism, mindless consumerism, degrading imitation of others, disconcern and disregard for others, and alienation from the earth itself and our responsibility toward. These 7 principles serve as essential views and values used by people to ground themselves culturally in ways by the way they live their lives, do their work, and wage their struggle for good in the world. They use them to name and ground themselves, to name and instruct their children, to name their organizations, institutions, projects, and to develop and conduct various programs and projects of community service, community building, community development, and struggle. I created Kanza for several reasons. First, to reaffirm and return to our rootedness in African culture. Second, to give people, African people everywhere, a special time to come together, reinforce the bonds between them, celebrate ourselves, and meditate on the awesome meaning, I said the awesome meaning of being African in the world. And finally, to introduce and reinforce the importance of communitarian African values, especially the Nguzo Saba. For indeed, the Nguzo Saba are the hub and hinge around which the holiday turns. Now, Kwanzaa is celebrated, as I said, by millions throughout the world African community on every continent in the world. And I am grateful to our African people all over the world, on the continent and in the diaspora, for bringing this into being. And it has become not only a source of cultural grounding for these millions of Africans, but also an essential means to expand the art of embrace and use of Swahili itself and Swahili community views and values. Also, it's important to notice, in keeping with the understanding of Swahili as a language of liberation and my being deeply involved in the Black liberation movement, I created and practiced Kwanzaa as an act of freedom, an instrument of freedom, and a celebration of freedom. It was created for one of the main reasons was to introduce and reaffirm the importance of the Nguzo Saba. But it was created and is practiced as an act of freedom, as a liberating return to our own culture without requesting or needing approval or recognition from others. And it was created as a means of resistance to racism and cultural imposition and imperialism of the dominant society. Also, it was created and is practiced as an instrument of freedom, a means of building a culture of resistance, raising culture and political consciousness, and cultivating a commitment to the liberation struggle. And it was in its practice, and it was created and is practiced as a celebration of freedom, a celebration of ourselves and of the liberating practices to free ourselves and be ourselves in radical rupture with the established order of oppression. And again, the use of Swahili was and is central to the process of practice. In the 60s, we had named ourselves us to reaffirm our commitment to a communitarian way of life as expressed in the Nguzo Saba in interrelated views and values, sensitivities, and practices. This communitarian way of understanding and asserting ourselves in the world begins with embracing the principle and practice of umoja, the first principle, umoja. It calls for a sense of oneness, an empathetic understanding and appreciation of each other, of being with and for each other as family, community, nation, people, and race, i.e. world African community. Moreover, umoja reminds us we come into being in relationship, and that with every relationship comes an obligation of doing reciprocal good. It is knowing, in the words of our ancestors in the Hosea, that the good we do for others, we're also doing for ourselves. For we are building the good and beautiful world we all want and deserve. And umoja teaches us the African ethical concept of the oneness of our people, the common ground of our humanity, and our shared identity and interest with the whole world and all in it. For we're not only Africans and human beings, but here again in Swahili, we're also world beings, walimwengu. Not just Africa, not just Watu, but also walimwengu, deeply involved in the history, current conditions, and problematic fate and promising future of the world. Here, the moral vision of Dr. Anna Julia Cook is central. She says, we take our stand on the solidarity of humanity, the oneness of life, the unnaturalness of all favoritism, whether sex, race, country, or condition. Also, it is in this context we embrace the teachings of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, who says that our task is to remake the world. It is nothing less than that. In a world where systems of oppression deny the rights of people and persons to rule themselves, to control their very bodies, to practice and enjoy freedom, and to live their conception of a good life as they see it without harm to others and the environment. Kujichagulia, self-determination, affirm and oppose the right and responsibility of every person and people to control their bodies and their own destiny in daily life and engage the world in their own culturally grounded way. It understands freedom as a natural right and fosters rightful resistance to all forms to deny and diminish it. Ujima, collective work and responsibility, teaches the principle and practice of building together a good relationship, community, society, and world we all want and deserve. In a context where the corporation monopolized wealth, claimed the earth as their own, and plundered, pollute, and depleted without conscience, right? Ujima, cooperative economics, teaches us shared work and wealth. The goods of the earth as a shared good to be protected and preserved, and the right of all to a life of dignity, free from domination, deprivation, and degradation. The principal practice of meal, purpose, instruction urges us to embrace the central value of serving, uplifting, and liberating our people and doing good in the world. Colombian creativity tells and teaches us to practice the ancient African imperative of repairing, renewing, and remaking our communities and the world, making them more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited. And Imani faith teaches and inspires us to believe in our people with all our heart, to believe in the righteousness and victory of our struggle, and in the good we do, and seek to bring into being and sustain in the world. And finally, the theme this year for the World Kiswahili Language Day of Kiswahili, Day of Kiswahili for Peace and Prosperity, reminds me of the lectures on peacemaking I have given over the years using the Swahili concept of mapatano. Kawida's concept of the practice of peace is rooted in the term patana, with its implication of peace as a mutual getting, a shared justice derived from the word pata, to get, achieve, secure. Patana as a reciprocal form of the verb stresses reciprocity in relation and in behavior. I coming to terms, agree, being reconciled, working in harmony, and thus achieving peace. The core concept of a mutual getting which leads toward justice and peace, or peace with justice. Therefore, peacemaker and patanishi is one who reconciles and achieves peace and harmony, mapatano, among persons and people by ensuring that everyone gets their due. And the first due is mutual respect. Here I link African cultures, stressing the Martin, the ancient Egyptian Martin ethical emphasis on peace, which says, quote, exceedingly good is the practice of peace, and there is no blame for those who practice it, unquote. For genuine peace is a reflection of justice in the world and a dual and interrelated basis for shared prosperity that achieves and sustains good and the well-being of the world. As African people, we say in Kawida philosophy, this is our duty, to know our past and honor it, to engage our present and improve it, and to imagine a whole new future and to forge it in the most ethical, effective, and expansive ways. And this too, we say, continue the struggle, keep the faith, hold the line, love our people, love and respect our people and each other. Practice the 7 principles. Seek and speak truth. Do and demand justice. Be constantly concerned with the world and all in it. And dare help build an overarching movement that prefigures and makes possible the good world we all want and deserve to live in and leave as a legacy worthy of the name and history African. Asante Sana.
Thank you very much. If we have any comments, 1 or 2 comments or questions from the audience, please stand up. And Mike? Anyone? Jonathan?
Yeah, one more question.
One comment from, can you have the mic? Jonathan?
Sasa ni kipindi cha maswali ataulizwa na Professor Jonathan ametoka Michigan. I think atajiintroduce yeye ni nani.
Unaweza kusikia Maulana Karim?
Daktari unanisikia?
Ego, asante. Ego.
Hello. Asante sana Daktari Zitkarega, Maulana. Yeah, thanks so much. This was a nice talk and nice to hear from you. Question really quick. I was reading online, you were born Ronald and some other colonial names, I can't remember.
You said what? Say
Hello.
okay. Ego.
It was a privilege listening to you. It was a nice talk. My question. I was reading online, you were born Ronald. Somebody said,
No, I wasn't born. I wasn't born Ronald. That's a bad start. What's your question? But go on.
when did you change your name and why?
Okay. Now I can do it. Yeah, that was my name my parents gave me. It's a technical thing, sir. I didn't mean to alienate you. I was just trying to get you to see. I'm very strict about that because a lot of times people say we're born in slavery too. We're born this, but we're not born that. Someone did that. My mother and father gave me the name, but that's because they didn't know the African name, because they had been, as other people, other African people, lifted out of their own history, made a footnote, forgotten casualty in other people's history. And our struggle was to return to our history in the 60s. So I changed my name, sir, and thanks for the question. I really hope I didn't alienate. I'm just used to debating, so I just wanted to again say a scientific question. So I changed my name in the 60s. When I was at City College, I began to ask myself, why do I have a European name? And Minister Malcolm, Nana Haji Malcolm said, if you ever heard of a Chinese named Whitfield, Japanese named Joe, he knew something was happening. It sounds strange for an Asian to have a white name. How much strange should it be for African to have it? And so he said, name represents your heritage. Name represents, your culture. And so I read Nana Jomo Kenyatta's book, Facing Mount Kenya. And I took my name, my last name, my family name, I took from his book, Karenga, which means keeper of the tradition. That's how I answer it. My other name, Maulana, was given to me by members of my organization who said, you're a master teacher. Your name needs to be Maulana. So I took that. And then another brother from South Africa, who was part of the struggle in South Africa, he said, your name should be in Darazita, constant concern to the enemy, which for me means constant soldier. So those are my names, and they reflect, sir, my activity, my self-understanding, my activity, my concept given to me and name given to me by members of the organization and the movement. So in the 60s is when I made the transition, even before the Black Power period, when so much came into being around re-Africanization. I started reading African literature and identified with African continental African liberation movements early, but I also had rooting in African American culture that made me question the word Negro and the European name that I had once. So again, thanks for the question, and I'm sorry I should have waited to let you finish, so I didn't look like I was interrupting you or doing something. So.
So we don't have much time for other questions because we're running out of time, right?
We have we can take two questions. Anybody who has or comment, please come over to the podium.
Yes, the podium, please, for the microphone.
Okay, two more questions, Professor Karenga.
Does anybody else?
If we have another question, please come close here.
I'm going to request our president to make a summary of what I'm going to speak about you for the sake of time. Professor Mwanda, my summarization is Swahili in English. I want to speak in Swahili. Ninapenda kukushukuru sana Karenga Maulana. Umekuwa mwakilishi wetu nakosa neno la Kiswahili religiously. Umekuwa mwakilishi wetu wa kweli kutoka kwenye moyo kabisa. Nimekaa mahali sio pengi Marekani, lakini sehemu chache nimeanza kuona sura yako kwa watu wa rangi tofauti waliosherekea kwanza wakiwa hata sio weusi kabisa, ndio nikajua jina lako. Na taasisi zingine ambapo sitataja tulipo, wana siku maalumu, wanasherehekea kazi yako umeianzisha na jina lako. Nimefurahi kukuona leo kwa sura, na wewe ni mpambanaji, ni mwakilishi wetu wa sio rangi ya watu, haki za binadamu na kila kitu. Nimefurahi sana, na ninapenda kufurahi kusema kwamba nimefurahi leo hata nikifa sasa. Nilikuwa na ndoto siku moja labda nikualike kwenye taasisi yetu hata uzungumze. Wanafunzi wetu wanasema tungeona huyo mtu. Umezungumza, nimekuta sana moyo wangu. Asante sana kwa niaba ya watu wengi wanaokukosa leo hii hapa.
Asante. Unaniheshimu. Ninajaribu kufanya kazi muhimu kwa watu wetu duniani. Asante sana.
Profesa Karenga, umesikia kile kitu alichokisema?
Nilimjibu. Nafahamu. Profesa wake. Nilisema nililotaka kusema. Nilisema asante. Ninamshukuru. Nilisema nimeheshimiwa kwa maneno yake. What else can I say? That was it. Yeah. Asante sana.
Nafikiri tumefika mwisho wa yote kwa maswali, na sasa ni wakati wa tumshukuru tena msemaji wetu.
Kuna swali nyingine?
Kuna swali?
Swali nyingine?
Ndio, kuna swali moja hapa.
Swali langu ni hivi, mwalimu na mtetezi wa haki hasa za kiuhuru wa kitamaduni na nyanja mbalimbali. Swali langu ni hivi, umekuwa na changamoto gani katika kazi hii ya kuinua heshima ya Mwafrika hapa Marekani na ulimwenguni? Changamoto zipi umezipata?
Profesa, umeelewa? Amelikuwa mbali kidogo. Nirudie ama umeelewa?
Rudia.
Okay. Profesa anauliza umekuwa na changamoto zipi katika kazi yako ya kutetea haki za watu wa Afrika ama watu ambao wamezaliwa Afrika hapa nchini na kwingine kote?
Okay. So if I understand you say, what is the challenges for Africa? You said
that you have faced in trying to promote rights and all that is about African people of African descent.
Well, Africans, just Africans. Sometimes I use that descent, but I don't want to be junior brother or junior sister, so I just say Africans. But tell me the question. Could you summarize it for me? Because I couldn't hear it. Could you just tell me what she said?
So the question is, what challenges have you faced in fighting for African people all over the world?
A lot. First of all, I had challenges from the established order, who does not want Africans to wake up and come into their own, right? So I was suppressed. I've been a political prisoner. I've been harassed and not employment, etc. But I'm working and I continue to struggle. I enjoy the struggle. And so the challenge is to never be defeated by the oppressor. Every day that you remain undefeated, refusing to surrender, you have destroyed the evil intentions of the oppressor, because you're there and you can continue. And I continue to struggle based on 4 fundamental things. Number one, a sense of obligation to our ancestors. We must honor our ancestors as they honored us. That is what we mean when we say to know our past and honor it. So I have an obligation. I have an obligation all the way from the beginning of the first ancestor to now. And certainly my mother and father and all my people who died in the Holocaust of enslavement especially, but also those killed and suppressed by imperialism and colonialism. So I keep the struggle going against racism and imperialism. Second, this is how I know myself. But if I said what my name was, Maulana Indabizita Karenga. This is how I know myself, teaching. This is how I know myself, Maulana as messaging. Indabizita as a constant soldier, right? Who's not unready, not even one. And finally, Karenga as a people of the tradition. That's the challenge, to keep the culture. We say we are American by habit and African by choice. And the other Africans are British by habit and African by choice. They are French by habit and African by choice. Portuguese and all the other colonials. And let us struggle against that every day. We must be African and we must choose. That's part of what it means to be African and human, to choose and to choose rightly and dare to bring good into the world. But the E4 says to us, let's do things with joy. And that's my third reason I'm into this. I enjoy this, right? And what do we find? Our sacred text from your said, let's do things with joy, for surely we have been divinely chosen to bring good into the world. And this is a fundamental mission and meaning of life. And finally, I do this, and this is a challenge. How can I leave a legacy worthy of the name and history African as those that were left for me? And so my organization and us, all those people who work are doing the same thing. And I stand in solidarity with them. Thank you so much for that question, Mr. Goodman.
Mwalimu, kuna swali.
Kuna swali moja.
My name is Smith, and I'm a junior from Colorado. Junior Swahili or Spanish major Swahili minor from Colorado. And my question to you is, how do you see the indigenous land back movement and people from the African diaspora using Swahili to reintegrate into African society?
Using Swahili to do what?
To reintegrate into African societies.
To re-enter African society?
Reintegrate.
Reintegrate into African society.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of African Americans and other Africans from the diaspora have gone back, as you know, so even during the Holocaust of enslavement, some went back. The whole question is, what are you going back for? The Honorable Marcus Garvey, may the good he left last forever, said to us that we must prepare ourselves here, because if we don't have skills and we don't have the right attitude, then we become a burden to Africa rather than an asset. So I believe that people should go back, but I also believe people should stay here and create free space for Africans everywhere. The world does not belong to white people. The world does not belong to the corporations. It does not belong to neoliberalism, capitalism, imperialism, and colonialism, and secularism. It belongs to the people of the world. And we have to struggle for that. But we have to be willing to sacrifice, to dedicate ourselves, right? And we have to sacrifice and struggle. My motto is always Nana Harriet Tubman, who lived a life in Holocaust of enslavement, but imagined freedom in spite of it, and was aided by mother and father and all the people around her who never turned her in, even though there was $1 million bounty on her head, right? But when she crossed the line, she said, you know what? I don't feel I have freedom, because she saw freedom was invisible, right? She said, I felt glad at first, but then I felt sad because all the people I loved were still back there in enslavement. And I declared that day I would help them enjoy this natural right called freedom. In that moment, she redefined freedom from individual escape to what? The collective practice of self-determination in and for the community. So yes, we can use the African languages, but we must also take African culture, right? And I don't believe just because one is born in the continent, one automatically embraces that. I don't. That's why I say we're African by choice, all of us, whether we live in the continent or in the diaspora. Yeah. You can learn the language, but remember what I said? I spent all my time teaching the values in the language. You take a word and ask, what does this mean? Why did our ancestors choose this word instead of another, this phrase instead of another? That's how I think. So yes, to answer your question, yes, with those things I just said. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mwalimu Karenga, huyu ni mwanafunzi ambaye anajifundisha Kiswahili kama wengine wengi. Kwa hivyo tunashukuru sana kwamba ameweza kukuuliza swali, kwa sababu kila mara atajiuliza kwa nini najifunza Kiswahili. Kwa hivyo tunashukuru sana kwa jawabu lako zuri. Tungependa kukujulisha tu kwamba tuna wageni wengi hapa, wametoka Afrika Mashariki, wametoka Europa, mabalozi wetu wako hapa na wanafunzi wetu wengi wamefika. Kwa hivyo asante sana. Tutaonana na wewe siku ya Jumamosi usiku wa Mswahili. Asante.
Pamoja tutashinda.
Actually, so we wanted to make this known to you guys that actually Dr. Maulana Karenga is receiving an award tomorrow during our usiku wa Mswahili celebration tomorrow evening. He's getting an award for Kiswahili and for the efforts that is shown, and we're going to talk more about that tomorrow. But you guys can see the kind of scholar and a person who is deeply interested in African culture and language, and this is really beautiful. I don't know if he's still here. He's gone, but let's clap again. Let's have a hand of applause for him. So, all right, so we're going for, we're twisting a little bit of our program because we have our lunch ready, and we have also our special guests here. They need to leave, and we understand because they have a whole lot of responsibilities of making sure that, especially those of us from outside the US, having good time in the US here, right? All right, so they're gonna leave soon, and what we're going to do now, we're going for lunch, but at the same time that people are lining for lunch, the organizing committee, the CHAUKIDU, board members who are here, and other invited guests, we're gonna take pictures here. So please don't go line up there because we're gonna take picture with our special guests here before we go for lunch. Kwa hivyo jamani, niseme tena kwa usahihi zaidi, naweza kuongea Kiswahili vizuri zaidi. Wageni wetu watahitaji kuondoka, lakini kwa sababu hiyo tunabadilisha pia ratiba kidogo, kwa sababu imebadilika kidogo. Tutakuwa na majopo ambayo yanafanyika muda mfupi tu ujao, lakini tunaenda kupata mlo kwanza, chakula cha mchana kwanza, lakini wakati huo tunaenda kupata chakula cha mchana. Wajumbe wa bodi ya CHAUKIDU na wale wajumbe wa kamati ya maandalizi ambao wako hapa na wageni wengine waalikwa, tunaomba wasogee hapa mbele, tunaenda kupiga picha za pamoja, alafu na sisi tutaenda kupata chakula baada ya hapo. Asanteni sana. Wale wajumbe wa kamati, wajumbe wa bodi, tafadhali msingoje hata sekunde mbili. Tafadhali tusogee hapa haraka haraka ili tuokoe muda. Wengine wote tunaweza kuanza hapo kupata chakula. Baada tu ya chakula, tutarejea hapa kwa vikao vinavyofuatia.
Mwalimu, nafikiri tufanye haraka tu save time yako. Nipo. Lakini sasa wengine wale wa
Alta President, David, First President of Alta, you're welcome here as well. Mwalimu Mahiri, tafadhali. Wadhamini pia,
fine. I think I
Well,
can
you
record
want
the
to
name.
karibisha pia?
I can record the name.
Roda please.
Yes, I left
Roda
my phone,
please.
so I could know when that's fine. Yes, that's fine. Yeah, so nice.
Zipora Musau, tafadhali pia.
Sorry.
Bakita, tafadhali na wewe mgeni wetu karibu hapa.
More people are coming to the picture. Wengine hawa wanakuja.
Sasa ndugu yangu, kama wewe umeamua kutoka, si nikupe tu nimalizie. Au ni baadaye as quality inapungua. Yes, sasa hapa ni
Utawashikaje? Na mimi nitaita.
Bwana Bandio, usijisahau ndugu yangu. Na wewe uko. Lakini weka vizuri mambo yako basi. Oh, karibu. Karibu. Na Filipo pia karibu.
Alexa, na wewe vipi?
Ma, na wewe njoo.
Kisha tunapiga picha tu. Geuza kamera yako imegeuka chini. Geuza hii.
Mwalimu, design.
James kisha inatoka vizuri. Nachoka.
Wakati na design hapo.
Tuone iko katika.
Naona subiri. Moja.
Naomba waheshimiwa mabalozi tafadhali.
I'm tired of inviting you to these. I'm telling you. I'll come one day.
Jambo Megan. Habari za leo?
Okay, yeah. It's okay.
Pitch that you're doing.
whatever came from your brain was good enough.
How are you?
I'm fine.
You see, this meeting, we forget that we are not seeing people.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I'm with for lunch.
Sorry. Oh, Jesus. I'm sorry.
Mkubwa, can you take a picture of us here quickly if you don't mind? Sir. Oh, sorry.
Unaenda Nairobi, Balozi.
Nairobi.
We want to take us. Yeah, that's Cameroon. So you message is
oh, yeah.
Is the mission catch you before you go. Thank you very much.
Tanzania. Sorry. South Africa. Yes, I'm the sister cities in
She's attending. Probably. She's at the embassy already.
Are you attending this the World Bank?
Don't have any. Yeah, no, I'm not there, but I will look. I'll look for the information. Yeah, and he's a very good brother.
Yeah, no, because they're looking for money. So that's why I was asking if
Let me know about it.
You guys stay for the whole 2 o'clock. Make time for my write-up. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good job, Bo.
Mgeni.
From Kenya.
Mwambia kae pale. Yeah, I'm asking a quick question. Couple questions. So you're talking to Michael? Yeah, check. Yeah. Peleke mic here. Yeah, check. That's okay.
What is this?
Sema.
I need to look at power. It tells me the batteries are. I think we're fine. Okay. Sasa. Jitambulishe kwa jina ni nani? Tunazungumza tu kawaida. Jitambulishe kwa jina ni nani? Ni kitu gani kimekuleta hapa?
Nijifunza zaidi ya chama hiki cha
CHAUKIDU.
Kuangalia wanaweza kufanya mchango aina gani kuonyesha madhumuni ya
Sasa katika wale wasiojua mzee Munze, sasa hivi ni mzee wetu, katika wazee wachache sana waliobaki Tanzania ambao walitengeneza na kujenga our education system kwa kusaidiana na Mwalimu Nyerere. Hebu tupe kwa kifupi historia yako katika education system ya Tanzania.
Kwanza ni fanya